Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And although we also had a patch in the game last week, and so it is pretty interesting to see what's happening in the game right now. I myself have not played a lot of EVE Online, and I should maybe mention that as well, because I saw a couple of very interesting Reddit posts. The first one was basically describing an interview with mostly CCP Helmar and CCP Falcon, who were talking about what's happening in the game right now and CCP's plan for the game. And it's more of the same, more chaos, more risk into the game. They really want to give EVE Online that hardcore edge back, that riskiness back, and it really looks like they are going to continue on the current trend with, well, potentially, as it was described there, weekly changes that are going to massively shake up the game. So very, very interesting, of course, completely different from what we've known in the last couple of years, and something to keep a close eye on. Also, the feedback there was that the Nullsec blackout was a success for them. They actually saw that PvE activities in Nullsec have dropped massively, ISK generation and things like that, which is of course what you would expect if you look at what the blackout does exactly, but that activity has kept up in their opinion. And now that's where my last week comes in, I think, because I also saw a Reddit post that talked about Nullsec being completely devoid of life outside of the big Nullsec blocks that still have that super capital umbrella to protect their big PvE activities. And well, the Nullsec blackout is undoubtedly going to be a part of the answer there, but for the last week, if we're seeing a massive drop of activity there, we had a absolutely massive heat wave in Europe this week, and I think that will have had an impact. At least for me personally, it was almost 40 degrees Celsius here in Belgium, and we don't really usually have air conditioning in this country. I don't have air conditioning, so you can imagine I go to work all day. There is air conditioning there, luckily for me, but then I come out here, it's like 32, 33 degrees in the house, it's 38 to 40 degrees outside. It's absolutely impossible then to say, all right, I'm gonna play a big session of EVE Online and be really active in those kinds of temperatures. It was absolutely impossible. So all I really did was log in, do my daily stuff, PI, grab the free skill points from CCP, my blueprint copies, keep the fuels situation okay in my structures, maybe one or two small rounds of exploration, but that is really it. And so this heat wave has completely gutted my EVE Online activity over the last week. What I did, of course, was this small skilling spree challenge that CCP gave us every single day. Either kill one NPC for 10,000 points, kill 5 for 25, and kill 10 for 50,000 skill points. Interesting little addition here, not too disruptive, and perhaps a way for CCP to try and give the newer players a leg up, because basically the interesting description that I saw there is that EVE Online should have like be a mountain of difficulty, but it's not high enough. Basically, Nullsec has been conquered and completely civilized. It's been made more safe than HighSec, but it's also not low enough, in the sense that new players often have a very daunting task when it comes to just getting started, finding your way in EVE Online. And so yeah, CCP is going to very much work on all of that. More changes coming, so it's going to be very interesting to see how all of that works out. Before we get started on the market, we are also going to take a quick look at the new Eden store. No sale this week, which is a bit of a surprise. In the last couple of weeks we consistently had sales, mostly centered around a certain race, right? Like the Rust skins for Minmatar and things like that. We're not seeing any sales this week, but we do have some new skins. So the Sasha skins are out here, the True Deliverance ones, looking reddish at this point. I'm not sure if it's my favorite color for these ships, but if you like spiky red ships, then these True Deliverance skins might be the ticket for you. So we get one for the Succubus, Phantasm, Nightmare, and the Revenant. Other than that, we've got some bundles front and center, which I also mentioned that I really liked the Stradio skin that was on sale, I think, last week, and someone actually gifted one to me. So thank you very much for all of that support. Of course, you guys are awesome, but you probably didn't see me in EVE Online a lot last week, as I've said, struggling with the heat wave. In fact, this EVE talk is going to be still a bit of a challenge because all that heat, while outside it should be over, it is still very much in this very room. I'm actually sweating right now. So let's get started. Let's jump into the market with some Plex and stuff, and we're going to get started at 510. Like that. And this starts to look like a very interesting chart in the last couple of months. Of course, this is the Plex chart, and we are clearly away from the top and in a sustained decline over the last couple of months. We're only really seeing 2 volume spikes, so I would read this as this is not CCP crushing the price with massive sales, although there have been some sales that have helped. This is really Plex prices declining. Of course, here again, I think we can point to 2 more likely culprits. One, the nullsec blackout. Once that's been going and has been announced, botting and PvE activity in nullsec will have gone down substantially, but also this is an actual normal seasonal trend for EVE Online, with a peak in May and then a summer decline, as activity generally does decline in the game throughout these summer months, and especially when you've got super nice or too nice weather in the game, that definitely outside of the game, then that has its impact here. So we see this in my opinion here also a summer low point here of less than 3 million here in August. Pretty important to keep a look at that. Then of course when activity increases and then potentially with great winter expansion and things like that, we generally then find ourselves with a peak earlier here. This time it's a May peak, and the decline is clearly showing up at this point well below 4 million ISK all of a sudden. So Plex in Jita are selling for 3.9 million, buyers are at 3.8 million, and if we go to the player owned trade hubs, we are below 3.8 million ISK for the sellers of Plex. Buyers are around 3.7 million. So that's well away from the peak that was close to 4.5 million. Should you start buying here? Well, if you absolutely want to have that Plex investment, you could start to slowly buy a little bit of that as an investment. I would consider that we are away from the 4 million ISK mark, and we see that the potential to 4.5 million, especially on more inflation, does exist, but keep everything that's happening in the game at the back of your mind. Of course, CCP is really bringing chaos back to EVE Online, and another aspect of the post on Reddit that I saw there, I really should try to find the actual interview in my opinion, is that they are worried about the economy. They are worried about the fact that there is just so much ISK in the game right now. They don't feel it's healthy, and so if they're gonna continue to look towards making things more risky, making things more costly and difficult to do, then this could of course continue to put even more pressure on the price of Plex as well. Next up, we have the multiple pilot train certificate that are basically bouncing from 1.5 billion, coming off of a sale binge here that is much more obvious than what we saw in the Plex. You can see the volumes shoot up, then decline as things settle down here, but we are still well away from the 2 billion ISK top for the training certificates, currently selling for less than 1.6 billion, and buyers are above 1.5. So this is a super narrow margin. Basically, the market has found its price range right now. We can actually expect this to not move in sync with Plex, of course, because this amount of volume and this sale will have caused an unnatural amount of these trading certificates to be on the market right now. So we can expect too much supply for the near future here, and so I think that we might actually just stay flat at this current price range here. For the skill extractors, we've got a chart that mirrors Plex very much, of course, where we have broken through the 450 million barrier, and here at the tail end in the last week or so we can see a pretty clear decline yet again. 424 million ISK for the sellers, that's pretty serious decline. 416 for the buyers, so here again well away from the 500 million top, and the decline is now starting to be really visible over the last 2 months or so on the chart. Let's take a look then at the impact on the skill injectors. Of course, that could be interesting, and that's a much sharper decline. And again here, something to note, multiple pilot train certificates on sale. That does mean that skill point farms have better margins all of a sudden and are able to drop their prices, and so that does happen. Now from 1 billion And then at the start of July, we have this sharp decline down to 900 million ISK on the chart now. It's 902 for the sellers and 885 for the buyers. So that's a pretty serious decline and still some margin to go even lower at this point. The small scale injector is doing the same thing. Peak at 210 million ISK, actually an early peak here in May together with our Plex peak. Then a bit of pressure, but never really going anywhere. And finally, on the, in my opinion, multiple pirate trading certificate sale, maybe a combination of course with the Plex going down as well, we finally have a breaking point and we are now down to 184 million for the sellers, 177 for the buyers. For your long-term investments, when it comes to if you want to protect yourself against inflation, I really like skill injectors, Plex and things like that. So it is gonna be a time now to keep a close eye on this. Try to time the bottom, try to find out exactly what's gonna happen as well with all of that increased risk and chaos in the game. But you can see that, in my opinion, an opportunity is definitely in the works. So I'm gonna keep a close eye on all of this. Next up, we have the daily alpha injectors, which are also down. We do see I would say a natural volume spike here. So we may have had a little bit of a sale, but it doesn't look like it was too major, nothing like this, of course. And so here, maybe one small sale through like a very specific package or something like that might have shown up, but it has decreased the price now from 70 million down to less than 60 million, 59 for the sellers and 55 million for the buyers. So we're obviously in the summer decline for the Plex stuff category. Moving on to minerals, coming in at 1130. Like that, let's take a look at these. So first of all, we've got titanium that went up to 7 ISK, so that was a very sharp rise, of course, on I think the deployment of the Imperium. And so you can see the impact of these really big groups and the economic hammer that they basically wield. Their footprint is so large now that just them deploying has such a massive impact on the price of titanium. Now 7 ISK is not easily sustainable. Hell, even before it was so easy to get massive yields in the game, this was a very high price for titanium, and so we are slowly declining, but you can clearly see that we're not crashing back to the 5 and less ISK range. We're at a 6 point, I should really take a look at station price, 6.5 ISK for the sellers and still 6.4 ISK for the buyers, so that is still substantially more expensive, and good news for the high-sec miners, of course. Next up, we'll have to see if this finally translates into the same thing for others, and very interesting, we see pyrite slowly go up in the last couple of weeks as well, pushing back on that 4.3 ISK medium-term bottom that has formed after an initial spike to 4.8 in June as well. 4.5 ISK for the sellers, 430 for the buyers, definitely away from those abysmal 3.0 bottom prices, but still not great historically speaking for pyrite. So here, in my opinion, considering where we were back in the game like years ago, there is still room for price growth in pyrite, but we should also accept the reality that compositions and mining has changed substantially over the course of the last couple of years, and that basically pyrite is one of the overabundant minerals that are, too easy to get compared to everything else and the average production cycles in EVE Online at the moment. That's just the reality. One that's usually considered an exception to that is Mexon, because it is the first bottleneck when it comes to nullsec mining. If they try to really do their own thing, the first thing they run out of is Mexalon, and so this one actually has been able to sustain a price that, even historically speaking, seems right. 65 ISK as an average, and not that long ago that was actually a normal price, but we do see that this one is going down in price, so we see a little bit of pressure back down to less than 60, I believe 60 for the sellers, 56.5 for the buyers. So here we see a little bit of pressure on Mexalon, a bit of a counter move to what titanium has been doing, although you could read this move up to 65 as a bit of a spike as well, and we're correcting from that. But unfortunately, bottom prices have been 55, and we're not that far away from that when it comes to the buyer. So it looks like Mexalon is actually pretty abundant at the moment, when it should be, at least on massive nullsec industry, the first bottleneck. I think in high-sec you're in a different situation, of course, because you get so many more sources of Mexalon. So we'll see how this one works out. Definitely something we have to keep an eye on as well, because this has been a gauge of, in my opinion, nullsec industry a little bit. So next up we have Isogen, basically the worst mineral, the one that was hit the hardest by all of these changes. You can clearly see that Isogen used to be more expensive than Mexilon. 150 was not a strange price, so that was crushed down in the last couple of years down to like 30 ISK, and now it's still the one that is just becomes too abundant in the game, and it is down to 15 ISK, and it is staying there at this very low bottom price. 15.15 for the first seller. Next up, almost 16 ISK for some of them, and then we're below 15 ISK for the buyers here. Isogen is definitely still struggling. It is too easy to grab, which is a little bit of a surprise from a lore perspective, because all these Isogen variants that are often used as sort of a special mineral fuel energy source from all of the more advanced races and things like that, tends to always be at the forefront there. Isogen this, Isogen that, and here to see Isogen to be this abundant, this cheap, just so available, feels kind of crazy for the name and its lore reputation, I would say. After that, we've got Noxium, which has been doing okay to hold on to 300 ISK. Now, historically speaking, again, this used to be like 1100 ISK and things like that for Noxium. So I think that there is still growth for the price to go up, and basically to make it harder to just mine massive amounts of these. It would still not be in a crazy place that we've never been before, but Noxium has held on really well and is staying away from the 300 ISK barrier, able to defend that very well. We're staying in the 3 to 325 range, 315 for the sellers, 310 for the buyers, really narrow margin, but at actually a good price for the year for Noxium. After that, we've got a couple more losers, of course. Now, this one is not only due to the mining changes, but of course mostly I would say due to the moon mining changes, where Zydra and Nmix has become available for 0.5 systems as well, and we see lots of people have taken up that activity, including myself. I create basically public belts for anyone that wants them, and so this one is now hovering just above 500 ISK at the moment. 528 for the sellers, 510 for the buyers, and then we have Megasite that's actually continuing to decline, not yet at a 1-year low point. We had a pretty serious crash here in November, but definitely still under pressure. 430 for the sellers and 420 for the buyers. In fact, we're clearly going to drop even lower when it comes to the buy prices here. So Megasite really not doing too well, super cheap at the moment. And then finally we also have a Morphite that is plateauing above 10,000 ISK. Now this is a different mineral, of course, tied to the Tech 2 economy rather than the Tech 1 economy that all the other minerals are tied to, and so this one is a little bit special. 10,500 for the sellers, 10,000 for the buyers. If you bought a couple months ago for less than 8,000 ISK, this is actually your time to take some profits, I believe. After that, we have the PI category coming in at 18 minutes. Let's go. I am really starting to get very hot here with 2 PCs running, but we're gonna keep pushing forward. I might try to speed things up a little bit though. So here are the broadcast nodes. Advanced PI material, not really popular, and now with what's happening in the game, I don't necessarily see a big structure or anything like that coming on the horizon too soon, so I would not be surprised that we're continuing on the current trend with sometimes 1-year low prices and most of the time well below average price. So broadcast nodes well below 2 million, 2 million for the sellers, less than 1.9 for the buyers is below average. After that, we have the construction blocks that is holding on to 13 construction blocks. Yep, there we go. All right, interesting volume spike, but after the price reached 10,000 ISK, which is obviously the lower end of the chart, so that's a nice investment that has been taken, driving the price up to 11,200 for the sellers, still at 10,000 for the buyers. So here, PI, if you follow EveTalk, you know from our last couple of weeks that again, summer slump does, in my opinion, often mean lower demand, but supply tends to stay pretty steady because the more active players do tend to just keep up with their PI activities. Even during the last crazy week with 40 degrees Celsius, what did I still do? my daily PI. So that production is still up and running. And so here, yeah, keep an eye out for opportunities like this person or these people have. When construction blocks drop to that really low point, there's the massive buy, and it's just driven back to an average price. Consumer electronics is next here. We also have a July bottom price of less than 12,000 disk. We're still at 14,000 now for the sellers and 13 for the buyers. So this one has fought its way back. But what we should probably look at, yeah, look at that. Sellers, just a couple at 13K, then it's already down to 12K, and then it's very easily down to the bad numbers here. So, and it's not that much in demand. So potentially this could go very quickly. Then we've got coolants that's actually going up in price. It is tied to fuels, which is a little bit different from most of the other PI materials. Of course, much more steady demand because, well, people need fuels in EVE Online. And so this one, after a pretty sharp decline in June with a bottom at 10,000 disk, is actually clawing its way back to an above average price of almost 13,000 disk. Buyers are still at 11,600. So here what we are seeing is that there is demand or stronger demand in the fuel related PI materials, and that this one has managed to go back to an above average price. Enriched uranium, same pattern again. Nice March peak here to 16,000 disk, actually doing really well on average. Then we've got that decline, but now we have our comeback up to 15,000 disk. So bought for 12K, now selling for 15,200 disk, 14,000 for the buyers. Yeah, a bit of a lack of availability here. Let's take a look at the player on trade ups. There's some available around here, but not that much. Again, fuel related still seems to have quite strong demand and is doing quite nicely, well above average again. The integrity response drones, advanced PI, mostly tied to structure here, obviously again below average, not at the bottom price just yet, but 2.4 million for the sellers, 2.3 million, and every time it's a little bit above that actually is, well, a little bit below average yet again. Mechanical parts is tied to fuels, and this one is doing something quite different. Again, here we get a March peak, a decline, and then a recovery up to 13K. Held on to that for a decent amount of time, but now overproduction is, I think, taking over, and we are declining to below 11,000 disk, 11,000 for the first seller, most at 11,500 to 600, but 10,000 disk for the buyers. And if you look for that on the chart, that is below everything. So mechanical parts, in my opinion, is currently in a buy order territory. These are also the declines that I was talking about. A bit of a surprise considering the other fuel related PI materials, that this one is now showing this 1 year low point pretty much on the buy side, and this opportunity. Then we get nuclear reactors, not doing too well. The volumes are just not there, although we did see people buy at 80K with a decent volume spike, but they can't drive the price up above 100,000 disk. It's 96,000 for the sellers, 82 for the buyers. Again, really decently large margin from buyers to sellers, and then the sellers are still like at not a great price. So I'm staying away for nuclear reactors unless we would dive to like 70 to 80K all of a sudden on the buy orders. That's where I would maybe make a move. Organic mortar applicators, advanced PI, and this one is actually holding on to the average price of 1.1 million for the year, 1.2 for the sellers, 1.1 for the buyers right now. Then we get robotics tied to fuels. Actually had a really nice steady 6 months up to 110,000 disk, and here a bit more volatility at the end, but we're still at 105 for the sellers and 96,000 for the buyers. And when we're saying volatility on this chart, keep in mind that it's quite relative. It's between 90,000 and 110,000 disk, all of these variations. So this is not that volatile because basically the difference in price between the lowest and the highest is not that great. Self-harmonizing power cores actually had a bit of a breakout last week up to 2.2 million. Doesn't last very long. 2.1 million for the sellers, less than 2 million for the buyers. We're heading back for a less than average price. A bit as expected, to be honest here, considering that CCP has not come out with an announcement that, all right, Gnostic Blackout is not a success. You guys are getting that structure. No, it's the exact opposite. We're liking what we're seeing. We're gonna continue with the chaos. Superconductors is also below average, went actually to a 1 year low point of 10,000 ISK. It's currently selling for 12,000. Buyers are still at 10,500. So here we are clearly seeing, despite the fact that we have a decent amount of orders competing for the superconductors, we obviously have an actual lack of demand here. These are all opportunistic investors that want to grab that really cheap superconductor market. And well, from time to time they'll succeed, of course. Then we've got test cultures that tried to get back to an average price, went above 8,000 discs. Yeah, again, doesn't last long. We're back down to 6,800 for the sellers, 6,600 for the buyers, and you can't browse here. So again, a lack of demand is clearly showing itself right now, as we're in the middle of the summer, I would say. And then we get Wetware mainframes that is continuing on the trend as well, and in fact right now is heading for 2 million ISK on the chart. Let's see where the sellers are at. A bit above 2.1 million, but the buyers are just above 2 million ISK. So here again, well below average for this advanced PI material. After that, we have our advanced moon materials coming in at 25 minutes. Yeah, I am hauling it a little bit. Hopefully temperatures will be a bit more doable. Let me just... my back is all wet now, but we'll keep going. Let's go. Crystalline carbonite here. Most of these actually had a little bit of a recovery. I would suspect on some nullsec activity and declining PvE activity there, of course. Maybe the drifters are also messing with the moon mining activities a little bit. So here we go. We had this nice recovery back to an average price, but right now in the last week, apparently, or last 2 weeks I should say, we are declining a little bit. And so I'm trying to see this from a nullsec lens, although I don't live in nullsec, but we know that the blackout happened, and we know that basically the response from the bigger groups, which of course would be major producers of these kinds of goods, will have been to consolidate, to basically trim any of the systems that are difficult for them to still protect, and focus on that umbrella of safety for their PvE members. And so perhaps they're now stabilizing and supplies are back. That would be my general feeling here. And so crystalline carbonite is indeed declining a little bit after coming back to an average price. Then we get ferrite carbide that also went to a bottom at 125, recovered in the last couple of months, and is now staying flat around 150 ISK on average. Then we have the number 3 titanium carbide that had a nice spike. This was obviously due to the deployment of the Imperium, spike up to almost 300 ISK from 175 here in June, and this has now declined back to an actually less than average price, 188 for the sellers, 183 for the buyers. It's back on the cheap side. And then we have tungsten carbide that also had a little bit of a breakout. Actually, just a couple of weeks ago went up to 250, but is already going back down to 200 ISK and 190 for the buyers. I would put this at an average price. So yeah, I think that at least for the carbides here, we can indeed see that the recoveries seem to be over. After that, we get the metamaterials. Here are the photonic metamaterials. Same thing, right? We went to a bottom price of 15,000 ISK, then a bit of a recovery here, but we're already on the decline in the last 10 days or so. Back down to 17,000 for the sellers, 16,000 for the buyers. A bit of a lack of demand might be playing parts here as well. Plasmonic metamaterials, 1, 2, 3, 4 step back to 25,000 ISK, but the latest decline again bringing us back down below 22,000. 23 for the sellers, but less than 22,000 for the buyers, is again showing that I think this recovery period here of 1, 2, 3, 4 months in plasmonic metamaterials may be over yet again. Then we have the non-linear metamaterials, same thing, triple spikes higher and higher, going from a bottom of around less than 25,000 to 28, almost 30, almost, and then above that. But now that latest decline bringing us back in line a bit. Still respectable though, almost 28,000 for the sellers and 26,000 for the buyers. Bit of a margin opening up here though. So I think here the trend will be set as well. And then finally we have the terahertz metamaterials that actually went to a 1-year high point of almost 28,000 ISK here, and then is declining again here at the tail end. Obviously 1-year high points are not easy to sustain, back down to 26,000 for the sellers, and again a 2,000 ISK margin with 24,000 for the buyers. So I'm starting to see basically the end of the recovery in most of these. Let's see if the other advanced materials show the same pattern. Fermionic condensate double step up to a 1-year high point of above 110,000 ISK, now back down to 100,000 ISK, so it's basically back on its average, but you can again see the decline in the last week or so, of course, and a bit of pressure still showing up at the tail end with data points below 100,000 ISK. Then we got ferrogel, again double spike to 52,000, bit of a decline. And are we below 50 for the sellers? Yes, we are. So these guys are just blowing straight through these defenses. 49,000 for the buyers. Not that much of a margin between sellers and buyers, but obviously again the recovery seems to be over. We've got Fuller Rights that had just one spike and is back below 1,000 disc. Not much to say here. Then we've got Hypersynaptic Fibers, again one jump up, second jump up to a higher 15,000 disc, but now this latest decline actually put us back to sellers at 13,000, buyers at 12,500 disc. Also at this point, all my fans in my PCs are blowing, so if you're hearing a bit of a background noise, I apologize for that, but there's not that much that I can do about it. We've got the nano transistors, alright, an exception to the rule, actually increased in several steps up to above 5,500 disc and is staying here. 5,600 for the sellers, complete lack of availability. It is not in the player trade hubs either, and 5,600 buyers have basically been forced up here for the nano transistors. We've got one exception due to a complete lack of supply. Phenolic composites then continuing to meander below average, so I think I've got an investment of that. Gotta wait for a breakout. Unfortunately, the general trend here seems to be it's not gonna be this week. And then we've got the ceramic fibers, again with the double recovery, staying at 500 disc, about an average price, and so 502, 480 for the buyers. Yeah, back on average. We'll have to see in the upcoming weeks when what will happen to the advanced moon materials, and I of course do personally feel like the reaction of nullsec to the nullsec blackouts, maybe also the summer decline and all the other changes that CCP will probably be making to the game, that's what we'll see reflected in the advanced moon materials. Next up we have the Take-Two ships coming in at 31 minutes. All right, pretty round timestamps this time so far. Let's go over these ships, and honestly, of course, we always will see the June spike due to the Imperium deployment, but with the advanced moon materials stopping their recovery, I think here it's gonna be below average mostly, and then looking for maybe some buy opportunities. So the Ares, for instance, buying for more than 25 million, sellers are below 27. Obviously, we're back below average. I would wait for a sharper decline before we move in. Then we've got the Basilisk. This one last week went to a really low price, called it that was a buy opportunity. We're not really seeing the volume spike, but we are seeing a recovery back above let's see here, 230 on average, so the sellers are winning out here. 238 for the sellers, 208 for the buyers. You could still risk this though, right? Buying for less than 210 million is still not bad for the Basilisk, but on this increased price it's going to be harder to actually grab one. Last week was the perfect time to grab some Basilisk below 210. Cerberus, actually a sharp increase in price all of a sudden, very interesting, bit of unexpected. On lack of supply apparently. 300 million for the sellers, back above average. 245 for the buyers, though they are not moving that much. Next up we've got the Crow, starting a sharp decline after again a June spike, so this is obviously the nullsec deployment. And then we get the recovery period, so we are back down to 29 for the sellers and 24 million for the buyers. That's actually pretty fast and a pretty low price. So again, a bit of a lack of demand starting to show up here as well, in my opinion. And yeah, Crows below 25 million might actually not be that bad for the more risk-averse people. Well, an interceptor is always nice to have. Then we've got the Guardian, same bounce here, so we get the June spike. Again, love to see that, of course, when nullsec goes on a big war. That does make for bigger waves in the Tech2 ship market. Then we have the decline, a bit of an overshoot as well. We went back down to 200 million, bit of a pricing, a spike in volumes as well. So obviously people made their moves on the Guardian. We're a bit late now, 240 for the sellers, 206 for the buyers. We had better opportunities a couple of weeks ago. Then we get the Heretic, finally moving up here, interdictors. All right, we've been waiting a very long time. I personally expected a move in June with the deployment of the Imperium, but now we are back above average. Finally, 87 million for the sellers, 67 million for the buyers. The people that have been buying at these really stable, low, below average prices finally see a sell opportunity. Next up, we've got the Hound, flat at 30 million, so that's gonna be another no here. 31 for the sellers, 29 for the buyers. I'd wait for a decline to 25 million. Then we've got the Ishtar. Interesting story, of course, in the Ishtar that went to a very clear 1-year low point, crazy low price for like less than 200 million ISK. And then we have the Vexor Navy issue nerf, and we had that massive jump up to 250, and now we actually have a double spike back up to 250 million ISK. So if you bought down here, guys, this is your time to still sell. 250 million for the sellers, 240 for the buyers. The Ishtar is back in popularity, of course, because, well, it is the 5 heavy drone meta. When it comes to easy PvE, I personally really enjoy flying the Ishtar as well, and that meta lost the ship because the Vexor Navy issue, god damn it, it's getting hard to talk, but we're gonna keep trying. Basically lost that role and it's become more of a PvP brawling ship considering the new bonuses. The Manticore next, so that was again here the June activity, spikes up to 40 million ISK, bottoms here 27.5 million, and then here we actually have a third breakout, not as high, but still 35 million for the sellers and 31 million for the buyers. We're back to a decently high price actually for Manticores. So this was, yeah, you bought here, sold here, great, and then you bought here, you try to sell, now you again take a profit. So love that volatility, of course, and the stealth bombers have been doing really well. The Munin slowly creeping its way back towards 300 million ISK on the chart at least, yeah, 280 at least, but nope, looks like we have new supply, yeah, in the last 24 hours. Bring that price back down from 312 million down to 265, and on not that many ships, so we're gonna see a decline after this recovery as well in the Munin. Then we've got the Nemesis, late spike, a bit of a surprise here, breaking out to almost 40 million ISK as we went to 25 million. Man, that's such great volatility. Still 36 for the sellers, 29 for the buyers. If you grabbed some cheap ones, let's say below 27 million, again, you have a sell opportunity. What a latecomer, right? What a late bloomer. I mean, we've got the Hound with some moves during the war. We've got the Manticore, that's pretty awesome, and then here we get the Nemesis, yeah, pretty much nothing over the course of May, June, July, and now as everything is over, here is the price spike, kind of a crazy one. Next up, we've got the Oneros, flat below average, but not at the bottom price, and bad volume, so that's not gonna be that interesting. Then we get the Purifier landing at 30 million ISK here again. June activity, look at that. This was a very nice year for the Purifier with 4 spikes up to around 40 million ISK. Now 31 million for the sellers, 28.5 for the buyers. 28.5 is decently below average, but yeah, I think you can wait for a better opportunity. We're basically landing back in the normal range. And then let's see if the Saber also, well, unlike the Heretic, doesn't manage to break out here. Did recover a little bit to 70 million ISK, but is already under pressure again. 107 coming in here at 69 million. That's gonna put some pressure on the price to stay below average. Then we have the Scimitar, also a late spike, very interesting. It might be that in like the slow, the small gang warfare, Scimitar and Nemesis find their role a little bit more, because this does seem to be a Gnostic blackout spike then all of a sudden. So Scimitar spike up to 300 million ISK, already recovering that, but still 270 for the sellers, 219 for the buyers. Yeah, a bit of a surprise spike. I'm gonna attribute it to the Gnostic blackout here, considering the timing. And then finally we get the Stiletto, flat above 30 million, so that is a no. But again, keep in mind what happened here in May, June. Bottom price 26 million, and you could have bought for that price considering the average here for the days, and then a spike up to 40 million ISK. Yeah, take 2 frigates volatility. Look at that Purifier chart, look at that Manticore chart, and now what's happened in the Nemesis, a bit of a late bloomer, but it looks like in the blackout he saw some popularity. Very, very cool stuff. Let's hope that the chaos can continue to bring these volatile periods here, although it must also be said the really big moves and shakes do happen when we get big deployments in nullsec. After that we have the Tech 3 ships. Let's move to that at 38.35. like that. Let's see what our destroyers are doing. First of all, these have been doing really well, and we get the Confessor working its way back to 40 million ISK, what I would personally consider to be a normal okay price. New ships 88 here is a lot, but the rest of this feels pretty okay, and so the Confessor is back on a normal price with normal availability, I would personally say. Then we get the Heckgate that has been flat above 40 million in the last couple of weeks, and actually slowly goes up in price again on a lack of availability. 46 million for the sellers, 41 million for the buyers. You can see that new Heckgates have not been brought to the market, so I personally think that we'll start to see some supply and then a decrease in price move here. Is the Heckgate a good roaming PvP platform? Potentially, right? If you want to really get in the face of your opponent, maybe like catch something at close range, a couple of Heckgates might make a lot of sense. So this one is now above average, I would say. And then the Jackdaw is actually landing at 40 million ISK. So this one is also slowing down in new supply. You can see there's a decent amount of sell orders, but you don't have to browse to see everything in the last 24 hours. And they're not crazy in volumes either. So the Jackdaw is right on the money, I think. Good availability, average normal price. And then finally we have the Zwepel that is flat below 40 million ISK, but it is the least popular one, and you can see that the availability is a bit lower here as well, with new Zwepels not really showing up. We're up to 40 million for these ships though, 37 million for the buyers, and the Heckgate is a bit of an outlier that I think lacks a bit of supply. So my personal expectations, most of these will slowly find their way above 40 million ISK, just above that I think on the sell prices, and then the Heckgate will probably see some more supply, which will decrease the price. But yeah, 42, 41 million I think is where all of them will actually reach, and yeah, I think it shows that these tactical destroyers are in a healthy, good situation. We've got a good market, we get a decent usage of them as well. I think we'll see that some more have been used and destroyed due to the Nosec blackout, and so what we're seeing here is that the price goes up a little bit on average. I think we can now go from 40 million to just below that to a bit above that as the normal price for the market here. Very cool to see, especially in the last couple of months. I've been really impressed with the tactical destroyer market, where we have not too much, you know, we're not cratering like the minerals or anything like that, and we don't have crazy spikes that make it completely unaffordable or completely manipulated or anything like that. Nope, normal supply demand reactions in this market. Very, very cool to see. Now in the cruisers it's a bit different, because the volumes there are so much lower that we have seen some crazy stuff, especially here, that may bottom on almost no availability. Felt very crazy to me, and now we do see the Legion go back up in price a little bit, and then 70 million for the sellers, 148 for the buyers, and availability, well, it's not a lot still, right? Can't really browse through. We get some opportunistic sellers, but let's say that we get a look at 180 and less. I mean, that's not a lot of Legions on the market. Now we have an increased price on slightly increased volumes, and yeah, the availability is still not great. The Loki did the same thing a couple of weeks ago, went up to 200 million ISK, and is already declining on, well, any supply coming in. So this is actually a lot of Lokis compared to the amount of Legions that's available on the market, but the price reaction is immediate as well. Bring the price back down from 200 billion ISK down to 175 now for the first seller. So I'm surprised to see this many Lokis show up on the market here all of a sudden, to be honest. Then we get a Proteus that's actually up to 180 million ISK, and it's actually back down to 170 already with just a couple of sell orders. So on the chart we go up to 180, we're gonna crash right back down. Look at the lack of availability here. That's what feels so crazy. That is what in my opinion is making this market very risky. Tengu, same thing here. We had bottom, really low price, 150 million in May and June, and availability was really, really low. So just a bit of purchasing, a bit of a shakeup drove the price back up to 190 million ISK. We're already back on the decline on, well, a decent amount of ships being brought to the market. 33 here, 32 there. That's definitely a decent amount. Now the Proteus, that's not a lot. The Legion, that's not a lot. And then the Loki also saw quite a bit of supply come in here all of a sudden. So this Tech 3 cruiser market is in my opinion, the exact opposite of a healthy, well-supplied market that moves decently, predictably with supply and demand. No, this one is ripe for manipulation. I think lots of people are attempting to do that. The complete difference in volumes between the Loki and the Legion, for instance, which in my opinion are still very much two popular PvP doctrines right now, I think is showing that. And then the crazy reverse situation of zero availability and bottom price that we saw in the last couple of months, same thing there. So this one could still really move in very, very unpredictable ways, in my opinion, and is not an easy one to wrap your head around, unless I think you're part of the traders and producers of these cruisers. They're the ones that are doing this. I think they're really dictating what's happening on this market. It's very cool to see, but it does make it feel like I don't know where we're going here with the Tech 3 cruiser market. Just looking at the Legion here actually going up in price, and this availability, you would expect a 1-year high point with these few ships compared to the Loki, but no, we've basically been here with low prices as well. So this one is a crazy one. If anyone does know what's happening in the Tech 3 market, definitely feel free to post that in the comments. At least the cruiser market. I'm really liking the destroyer markets from a logic standpoint. And then I'm actually gonna make it easy for myself. I'm actually gonna scrap, and we'll keep that for next week. Someone requested compact modules, but that could become a very big topic as well. Let's take a look at the Vexor Navy issue actually, as the extra product coming in at 4510. There we go. It is of course the ship that has been changed. So ships, we get cruisers, we get faction cruisers, Navy, right? And now we get the Vexor Navy issue. Alright, well, this is interesting. We get a slight increase in price up to 60 million. This does mean that I should take a look at what's happening with the Caracal, for instance, as well. That one is continuing to decline. So difficult to say exactly how the market has reacted to the changes to the Vexor Navy issue. In my opinion, why? Because of course this is a Navy faction ship, and so it is tied to the LP changes due to faction warfare. And so here we can clearly see that we have had a massive decline from a year ago down to March, where Galente won out, because the cheaper the LP, the better you're doing in the faction warfare, the cheaper the LP. So we went down to 50 million ISK pretty much for the Vexor Navy issue. Then Caldari must have won out. So let's see, take a look at the Caracal Navy issue. Yeah, here things were very expensive in the Caracal Navy issue. So in the Caldari ships, of course, because you know you're not winning, so you're not making lots of LP, so this becomes very expensive. 100 billion here. And now we get the reverse here, April, May, as prices decline for the Caracal Navy issue. Prices go up for the Vexor Navy issue up to 90 million ISK. Look at that potential trade, not bad at all. And then here we have the very, very sharp decline, but a little bit of a spike, where the Caracal Navy issue is continuing to decline. So the Caldari faction warfare seems to still be doing okay. The Vexor Navy issue just completely crashed down, and I think that could be due to the changes here as well. Partly that it completely lost its popularity, bit of a resurgence at the tail end, so maybe the market overreacted to what could happen to the Vexor Navy issue, and then moves back to 60 million on it turning out to still be a pretty decent platform. I should really look at the other Galente one, which is Executor, I think. Yeah, you can see that the Executor is just not that popular and is actually declining as well. So that's kind of a weird situation. Caracal is declining, Executor is declining, Vexor Navy issue is climbing, and then we get the which is the other Caldari one, the Osprey Navy issue. Yeah, that's, I mean, this has to be super cheap 1-year low points Caldari LP right now. And then to actually see the Executor Navy issue decline, and then that Vexor Navy issue finally shoot up a little bit. Yeah, I'd actually call this increased price here a move in LP, not so much in what happened to the Vexor Navy issue. So decently interesting, I would say, in the sense that the nerf to the Vexor Navy issue doesn't really seem to have impacted the market that much. You know, these Navy faction ship markets are really dominated by what actually happens in faction warfare. And if you read the post that I mentioned right at the start of this EVE talk, they have their eye on faction warfare as well, with something like seasonal content was mentioned there, which apparently they've been testing in a closed beta in China. So quite a surprise. Yes, CCP taking some pretty damn bold steps. And then to my surprise, yeah, the Vexor Navy issue, super popular ratting ship, of course. Yeah, that has been changed, and then the market actually doesn't make that much of a fuss about it apparently in the last couple of days. Kind of a weird one actually for this extra product, but that's gonna be it for this EVE talk. I'm actually gonna take a shower to try and cool off a little bit, because it is still really hot here right now. Hopefully it's gonna get better last week so I can find more time for EVE Online. But for now, thank you very much for watching, guys, and as always, I'll see you next time.